Well, 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 if it isn't Nvidia. The same Nvidia that didn't send me a Founders Edition 3080 to review yesterday and waited until 3 days before reviews go live to send me a working driver. How dare you show your ugly face in these parts? But it's fine, because you know what? Your AIB partners have a much keener eye for good tech channels to send review samples to, and they have graciously provided me with their first takes on the 3080. So, you can suck it. Crappy jokes aside, in today's video I'll be taking a look at the ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 3080, which I think is the first time the TUF branding is making its way into higher end cards, so it should be especially interesting to see whether the TUF 3080 can hold its own with the best of them. Especially since I'm expecting to see the card land in the middle of the pack around $750 to $760, or in the ballpark of 21,000 Rand here in South Africa. Unfortunately, I don't have confirmation on those prices just yet, but we'll find out after this video goes live, I'm sure. But before we get into the review, if you want to pick the card up when Amazon actually starts listing them, feel free to use my affiliate link down below. It helps the channel out and it costs you nothing. And if you're in South Africa, just grab it at Woodware and save yourself the hassle of dealing with crappy customer service and horrific after-sales support. Now, I know you're all here to see how this thing actually performs, so I'm not going to blue ball you with a 30-minute video before I actually get into the numbers. But for those of you who haven't already watched and read all the reviews that came out yesterday, let's just get a quick refresher of the 3080 GPU itself, or at least just some of the highlights. Built on the new Ampere architecture, the 3080 comes equipped with an eye-watering 8704 CUDA cores, clocked at a base frequency of 1440 MHz and a boost clock of 1710 MHz. It also ships with 10 GB of GDDR6X memory with a 320-bit bus, 760 GB per second of bandwidth, and an effective memory clock speed capable of 19 GB per second. Also on board are 68 second-generation ray tracing cores to turn RTX even more on, and 272 third-gen tensor cores to handle deep learning workloads and a couple of other interesting things. It also supports the new PCIe 4.0 standard, which probably won't make much of a difference in gaming performance right now, but with newer game releases we'll almost definitely see that becoming a factor. As for the ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 3080, it features everything we just looked at, but with some tweaks thrown into the mix. It features a decent max core overclock all the way up to 1815 MHz, 3 DisplayPort, and 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, which people like me with monitors that only have HDMI ports very much appreciate. And instead of Nvidia's stupid 12-pin connector, the card features 2 regular 8 pins. But obviously those are small tweaks. The big one, and the one I'm betting most of you actually care about, is its overall design and cooler performance, and we'll definitely get into that in just a bit. First, let's get to why you're all here. We've got some benchmarks, baby! The system I used for testing the card is a bit of a weird one since the parts for my RTX 30 series test bench didn't arrive in time, because obviously they didn't. But it is what it is. So for testing, I used the Ryzen 7 3700X running at stock settings with Cooler Master's Master Liquid ML240R handling cooling, 16 gigs of memory running at 2933 MHz, a 750 watt power supply from Antec, and here's the weird part, my old X370 motherboard. That's right, after a few BIOS updates, the 3700X worked just fine with my old X370 motherboard. Crazy stuff. I checked CPU performance against my own 3700X testing from when I worked with a B550 board a while ago, and the numbers matched up pretty perfectly. All of this is to say that my follow-up coverage of the RTX 30 cards, get subscribed for that, will be based on an upgraded version of this test bench, so don't go expecting to compare these results to any of those. Now, let's get into it. As you'll notice, for comparison, I added my GTX 1080 as well as ASUS's RTX 2080 Super for comparison with the 3080. But do note that the 2080 Super was tested on a different test system, results for certain games aren't included because those games will run at different settings, and I never tested 4K on the 2080 Super or 1440p for any of the cards due to time limitations. So first off, let's take a look at those time spy and superposition benchmark numbers because they're amazing. The 3080 more than doubles the score of the 1080 in Time Spy and outperforms the 2080 Super by a huge 53%. It also crushes the other cards in the superposition benchmark, beating out the 1080 by 97% and kicks the 2080 Super to the curb with a 38% uplift. The card also flexes its muscles hard when it comes to the Blender benchmark, producing the fastest render times I've ever personally seen with these two specific benchmarks. Nvidia has clearly focused as much on the productivity performance of the card as they did on the gaming side. As for actual game benchmarks, it's clear that the 3080 was not built for 1080p gaming, as I saw some heavy CPU bottlenecking going on. You'd need to be rocking something like a Core i9-10900K at 5.2 GHz, and you'd need to crank literally every setting in every game to the absolute max to get the most out of this card at 1080p. It really does suck that I didn't have the time to test at 1440p, as that's almost certainly the sweet spot for this card. 1440p, max quality settings, and high frame rates pretty much guaranteed. But what we do have is 4K, and to me that's where the 3080 really shined. The poor 1080 just couldn't keep up, and even though I don't have the benchmark numbers to show for it, as far as I remember, the RTX 2080 Super had a hell of a time hitting and sticking to 60 FPS in most games, which is definitely not the case with the 3080. It not only managed to hit 60 FPS, but averaged more than 60 FPS in every single one of my 4K benchmarks. This really is the first ever card that can manage to do that at those high quality settings, and that says a lot. And then finally we get to see the card flex its ray tracing and DLSS muscles. With those updated RT and DLSS cores combined, ray tracing is now finally a viable and very attractive setting to turn on. And for the first time since RTX was announced many years ago, I'm actively looking forward to seeing game developers implement it into their games. So, clearly the ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 3080 came to play, and play hard. But it's time we take a closer look. And first things first, this card is legitimately one of the best looking RTX 30 cards that we've seen so far. I don't know what the hell happened, but the majority of the 30 series cards I've seen just look kind of ugly. Some cards look like they're trying too hard to be different, while others look like they're straight out of 2005. It's weird. But thankfully, the TUF Gaming bucks that trend entirely. The brushed aluminium everywhere and the gray color scheme looks fantastic, the 3 fans adorned with branding look intimidating, and the touch of RGB on the TUF Gaming logo is a really nice touch, even though it does get blocked by the power cables. I'm not really too much of a fan of the skid mark-like patterns on the aluminium backplate, or the very obnoxious GeForce RTX branding on the side as well as the back of the card, but compared to the majority of the other cards out there, I can definitely live with it. The card also feels just as good as it looks. It's a big boy that takes up just shy of 3 slots, it's reassuringly heavy, and the full metal shroud makes it feel indestructible. This is a tough card after all, and it sure as hell feels like one. And because it is a tough card, we also have some premium military grade components inside, including capacitors, some durable dual ball bearing fans, and other tough class touches that are always appreciated. But none of that matters if the cooling system sucks. And thankfully it doesn't. In fact, this thing keeps the 3080's temps in check like a drill sergeant. At idle with a 21 degree ambient temp, the card sat around the 26 degree mark. And after far too many hours of benchmarking and an intense firmwork session to cap things off, the GPU only managed to hit a max of 61 degrees, which is just stupidly good. From the reviews I've seen of the Founders Edition, most of them looked like they averaged around the 72 to 79 degree mark, so yeah, not bad. This is especially impressive since Afterburner reported that the card was maxing out at a core clock of 2040 MHz and was regularly sucking down around 363 watts. And it did all that without ever maxing out fan speed, with it hitting a max of 73% utilization or 1849 RPM. All that cooling comes courtesy of the huge heatsink ASUS has thankfully stuck on this thing, along with those 3 Axial Tech fans and a nice wide vent in the back of the card, allowing for more air to pass through. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to spend any time overclocking the card, which is a real shame because it does feature a dual BIOS switch. But if you want to see some overclocking of the card in action, I believe my fellow South African tech YouTuber, We Do Tech, has that area covered. So go check out his review video. It should be out like now. And that's going to have to wrap things up for this review. The TUF Gaming RTX 3080 is an impressive piece of hardware in every way possible, and it seems poised to be one of the best 3080s in its price class, and maybe, just maybe, even beyond it. The only concerns I have with it is that it might be a little power limited for high overclocks, only featuring 2 8-pin connectors rather than the 3 I've seen on other cards. But hey, maybe I'll bring it in for another run to test that theory. Anyway, if you enjoyed this review, drop me a like down below, get subscribed because I've got a lot more RTX 30 cards I'll be covering next, and let me know in the comments whether you'll be picking one up, or are you waiting for the 3090, 3070, or maybe Big Knobby? Who knows? Let me know. Huge thanks to ASUS South Africa for sending the card over for me to check out. And again, if you do plan on picking the card up, I'll drop an affiliate link to it in the description as soon as they go on sale if you want to help support the channel. And as always, if you're in South Africa and you want to support yourself with some dope new tech, do yourself a favor and check out Wootware, also linked down below. So yeah, have a good one.